Welcome back to the Samet Industries Podcast. Today, there's me and our good best buddy, George. Welcome, George, to the podcast. Uh, Today, we don't have a Will Samet, but he is off screen being one of the best producers of all time. But instead, we've got the two of us. We're just trying to figure things out, the two of us. George, tell us a little about yourself. How'd you get into our house? How'd you get into my life?
Well, I met Will. I was initially aware of Will through the forums, of course.
Okay.
I'd been around
Back when
for
the
about
forums were pretty big.
I'd been around for about a year or two at that point, and I was like, "Who's this new young guy? What's he doing? These stickers, these wheels." It's kind of a little bit. When you back then, I was like one of the few like young people who was on and active in the forum. Like there's
Sure.
me and Tommy and whoever else. And so when another young guy kind of comes around, you kind of feel like.
Suss him out. See if
Yeah.
if he's one of the cool guys or if he's just one that's gonna start cutting stuff up.
Or I was afraid, is he going to be cooler than me?
Oh
no. There's also that thought too.
A little competition.
So it's like, I'm not sure what this guy's doing, but I finally met you all at Madness 10.
Yep, our first madness.
And then I kind of realized, oh, he's just a huge car nerd like me.
He's just a nerd.
You know, like we're going to be good buddies.
Well, when you see his first car, you think, who is this guy?
Yeah, like Vape Bro.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibes I got initially.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
Loud techno music.
That was one thing.
that is a thing about Will, but
True. The
a
loud
surprising
techno
thing.
music is definitely a thing. But that was one thing that he was always really happy about with the group is that even though his car looked absolutely obscene, people were still so kind. Like there was somebody
Yeah.
at our very first meet who had agreed to give him a part and didn't know him at all. Like just was online and yeah, I'm going to give you whatever. We're going to do a quick swap. And he met him and he was like, "You're just a good kid." And Will's like, "Yeah, I'm just Will." And he was just blown away because he sees your car and he just thinks you're just an absolute yikes.
it was interesting, yeah, because it's like a lot of Will's mods on his first car were like a second-hand car culture thing.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
it's kind of the thing that like, ruffians would do.
Ruffians.
And then they made it cool.
Sure.
And so car nerds like me and Will kind of observed that from a distance. Like, this is what you do if you want to make a car cool.
Right.
But because the ruffians pioneered it, that's kind of the vibe you get when you see
Yeah,
those sort
you
of
just think he's gonna
modifications.
be racing you on the street or something and causing real trouble.
But he was just as a observer, admirer of car culture as much as he was the car itself.
I didn't even see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I give a shout out to Dan and MO. He's the one that he saw the regular car review video.
Oh,
So my shifter said and on the forum said, "Hey, if you come to Lake Festiva, I will give you a brand new shifter linkage, or I should say a rebuilt shifter linkage with brand new bushings and stuff." I was like, "Oh, dude, that'd be great, thanks." And I meet him, and I think he said like something along the lines of, "I thought you'd be like a real dick wheel." It's really cool that you're not. What blew me away though was that in his mind, I was some dick wheel, and yet here he was going to offer me a brand new part anyway, free, just completely the goodness of his
Right?
heart. And that's when I really thought, like, wow, this community is just really incredible. There's a lot of incredible people in here.
Yeah, this is the group you want to be a part of. If you can go from thinking this kid is just an absolute and still offering kindness and to help somebody out, that is huge. One instance of that we personally had were on our way to Texas for the first time. I've never been to Texas before. We broke down. We just ran out of gas because do any of our cars actually tell how much gas there is?
And it varies. It varies.
It varies.
E on one car is, in a different
Right.
place than the other.
Right. I got in the LX the other day and I texted Will, I was like, okay, does this gas gauge work or is it because it's too cold and it's not showing up yet? So we ran out of gas because in the Aqua, half was actually empty.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran out of gas and we're sitting on the side of the road in Arkansas. And within 10 minutes, somebody pulls behind us and it's Neil Jackson pulling his own Festiva. And I had never met this man before. Will had never met this man before. And yet he pulled over because he saw a Festiva, And when I think about it, I would never do that if it wasn't a Festiva. If it's a
Yeah.
Festiva, I'll stop.
Yeah.
Because you never know who it could be. It's
Yeah.
probably a cool person that
Yeah.
you know online.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. There's been several instances of shenanigans and falling apart in different trips. So we met at probably Madness.
It was Madness 10, yeah. And then that back to the point what we were talking about is, Will kind of had this reputation as,
Yeah.
that kind of car guy with the mods he chose. But then you meet him and he's just a really nice, generous car nerd like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And something clicked there. Like, we kind of have the similar like ADHD kind of like burrow in research.
Yeah.
Kind of.
All of a sudden, you guys are like trying to find things on international eBays and trying to just find these crazy parts. And just talking all the time. Like I would say, who are you talking to? And it's always either George or Steven or somebody else that he's become really good friends with now.
And then finally, I came up for Lake Festiva that next year after Madness 10, and that's when I had the Aspire with the Dick Meyer B3. And I don't know where you were. You were busy or gone?
I don't know what summer that was. I might have been traveling or something.
Because it was in the spring. It was like April or May, and so I just hung out with Will at his parents' house. I traded my Festiva spoiler for a gaming PC that he had built.
Oh gosh!
And we spent like the night before Lake Festiva staying up so late just playing computer games together and talking, and that's like I think really when our friendship beyond these cars kind of formed.
That's really cool.
And we drag raced on the rural Illinois roads.
Love it.
And with the Aspire and his unbeatable Magic B3.
That's also where the hoarding began. So thank you for that. I have a lot to blame. I have a lot of you to blame for that.
No,
for a lot of things.
I think especially early on, like a lot of Will's interest in parts and auxiliary pursuits.
Right.
I was kind of there enabling. Like we have a very similar mind in that we just want to find, open all the tabs about all the things.
Well, heck, and I live in Lexington because of you too. I mean, without you, it wouldn't have happened. Like you were our one person in Lexington that kind of anchored our desire in some way to move here.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been just so wonderful getting to know you all through both the hobby and as people, because you all continue to impress me.
That's sweet.
Every year, everything you're involved in is just more and more impressive, and you all just have such a big heart.
Yeah.
And great brains too.
It's just crazy to go from, you get a silly car thinking you'll save on some gas mileage, right? And then all of a sudden you get online and you start meeting all these cool people, and then heck, years down the way, like George is literally in my wedding.
Yeah.
Like in my wedding.
Yeah.
Trying to probably run away with me, which I wouldn't blame. But, and like literally sleeping at my house the night before. I was just thinking about that the other day too. I was like, Louis was in my house the night before. George was in my house the night before. Like I had more men in my house the night before my own wedding than ever. And going from that to then, okay, well, I guess we're going to move to Lexington. Yo, Ben, like, George, can we like stay at your place real quick? Can we leave a car at your apartment for several months?
I had forgotten about
full
that.
Of stuff? Like,
I had forgotten about that
crazy.
until you mentioned it in the last podcast.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last podcast. So if you haven't listened to the first podcast where Will actually interviews me, I would definitely recommend it because it talks a lot about, just how we kind of got here. One of the other crazy trips that I know we both were on and participated in was our trip to Insanity. So you did a swap in Ohio, and I think that's why I was confused earlier.
It was Tennessee.
That's right. You initiated the swap, I think, at Ohio Festiva, and you were running on it for a while. Before we went on our trip to Insanity. So Insanity is the meet that Charlie Whitney used to put on, where we actually got to race our cars on a real track, because that's what Charlie does. Like, he actually races. So someday we'll have him on the podcast, which will be really cool. But Insanity in itself was a huge get together. I loved it. Having I think there was maybe 10 Festivas on track at once. Like, that was awesome. But getting there was a challenge. What happened for you?
So yeah, that's right. Yeah, I started my engine swap. I put in a single cam V6 in my car at the time. At Ohio Festiva, Tommy helped me with that. I was too nervous to do a swap on my own. Like, just knowing I'd mess it
Ohio
up somehow.
Festiva used to be like, this is where you do your swaps.
Yeah.
Every year, back to back to back, somebody was doing something.
Tommy is just, so generous with his time and tools, and is like, he's also kind of like a real enabler. Like, we'll get it done. We'll get it done. Oh yeah, no big deal.
Easy peasy.
I'll lay on the ground cursing and covering myself in sparks just to build your exhaust for you.
Yep.
We'll get it done. Like, great guy. So we got the swap done there, and yeah, I had just been driving on it for a few months,
Yeah.
and I set off to leave for Insanity on my own. I was going to meet up with Joe and Paul, who was driving Nate's car, somewhere along the line. But once I made it to Memphis, and right as I crossed the Arkansas border, the car just got really hot, and I started getting the really bad ticka.
Ooh.
And
And that's the one thing. You never want these cars to get hot.
yeah,
Like, I think Will has run his car without oil for months at a time.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. But if it gets hot, whoo, stop.
and that's
Do
what
not
I
drive.
that's what I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And I'd blown the head gasket, and I was like dead in the water. And of course, we were all very plugged in Messenger, where everybody was, what was going on, and we had a plan figured out pretty quickly that Cliff Dodd was going to borrow a buddy's truck, come drive like 3 hours to pick me
Yeah.
up on the trailer. Paul and Joe, who were, I think, further along, were going to divert and come back to Cliff's. And
To see if they could get you back on the road.
right. And the situation was, we woke up the next morning, we got everybody together. We woke up
Yeah.
the next morning, got started on it early, because at first we thought we could just throw another head gasket in it. But I had done it so bad that there was a chunk missing out of the head.
Oh, my gosh.
And because I had a single cam B6 and there wasn't any around or in any junkyards.
Sure. Well, and Cliff, I think, kind of works for a junkyard. We actually on our way back from Texas, we weighed our Festiva pulling a trailer with Cliff, which was really cool. Just to meet him, which was super cool,
Oh,
too.
he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he put us all up, and so we sought out every possible solution to keep the B6 in there, but it just wasn't working.
And you had a little bit of time not to kill, but you were hoping to get there early, right? So you
Right.
gotta
Yeah,
help
we were a
set
few
up.
days early, but we
Yeah.
wanted to get there and help out, and I think there was a few projects that we needed to work on.
Yeah.
But so we had to resort to putting a B3 in it. John Allen, who was just a few hours away, had a B3 and offered to bring it halfway. So we got the whole engine out. Paul and Joe lifted the block out without a crane. We didn't have a hoist.
Wild.
We were just doing it in a carport, not a garage.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Wow.
I'll share the clip so you can overlay it.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
So they hoist it out just with their man arms, and we've got the engine out. We're waiting for the engine to come from a state away, and finally it comes, and we get it all in and running. I think it was
Wow.
like 9 hours start to finish.
Wow.
And that was with a lot of indecision, not knowing what we were going to
Sure.
do.
Like not know where you could even get another engine, not knowing the problem at the beginning. Wow, that's crazy.
And then the next day, we did 800 miles or something crazy like that.
Just back on the road.
I think we made it to Arizona in 2 days after that.
Wow.
And I drove it on the track. I drove it home, and it continued to run on that B3
Yeah,
for a while.
did you do pretty well on the track? Do you remember?
Well, that's the one issue was that the oil in that engine. It had a big blow-by issue. And we tried putting in a catch can,
Okay.
but it just kept blowing oil. And then it rained.
Yeah. It was
So-
really rainy one day.
I did get a few good laps in.
Yeah.
But the rain was
The rain always makes people a little hesitant because especially if you drove there yourself,
yeah.
you want to make sure you can get home. And I know
Yeah.
for you, getting there was a hard thing. And I know for us, getting there was also a hard
Yeah.
thing. Within this meet, we've got several people on the same chat, like keeping up with each other. Oh my gosh, George made it. That's fantastic. Like we're all just super overwhelmed. And Will and I are planning to go to this meet as well, but we had to wait for a while. We did not have nearly
Yeah.
as much time.
I mean, it was already a miracle that everything
Yeah.
that happened there with the generosity of Cliff and Joe and Paul and
Everything
John
just
and-
kind of piecing together to get you back on the road.
Yeah, and get me there. And, that was a miracle that it all lined up and that we got there. And we thought, okay, all the worrying is over.
Everybody else is going to have a great time. This meet is destined for greatness. Oh my gosh, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to race. We're going to have a good time. And then these hooligans, the Samets,
these Samet kids.
these Samet kids try to come out here and just start wrecking everything. It was crazy. We didn't have nearly as much time to get there. And we start driving out in this crazy cold snap, which we're kind of going through right now. At least we went through last week here in Kentucky. And we're just going to go straight through. Will and I weren't even planning to stop. Like we were just going to sleep somewhere for a little while and keep going, which we started out doing until we were in Oklahoma and we stopped for the night. Like we drove straight from Illinois to Oklahoma in one sitting. And then we stopped for that night. We were getting really tired. We took a nap for a while. I was going to drive. Maybe 5 hours in, we're now freezing because even in Oklahoma, it was cold.
Oh, for sure.
And so I start driving, so tired, but I got to keep us going. Like, we have to race. I think we were racing the next day probably. And we got to get there. We got to get there in time to make sure everything's good to go. And we're driving. We stopped somewhere in Texas at this point and fill up with gas. Will finally wakes up. We're driving. And I see something in the road get kicked up behind a semi, and I think to myself, it's fine. It's just a chunk of snow. No, it's a boulder. It's a legitimate, like, if you're watching, I don't know. It's huge. It's huge. It's a boulder. And I had no idea. My sleepy self from Illinois is thinking, this is just a chunk of ice.
Yeah.
It'll be just fine. So I middle it, and thankfully, we didn't ruin the transmission. We actually, I remember, looked at it later, and that little block off plate on the transmission, now we know why that's there. It's the anti-boulder plate.
Yeah.
And then we stopped because now we're spewing gas everywhere that I just filled up with, and now we're stuck. And we have to do the exact same that you did. We have to tell everyone, we're stuck. We don't know what to do. We're about 12 hours in. We got 12 more hours to go. What do? Do you turn around? Do you keep going? And we kept going. I mean, we turned around. We got a gas tank patch while everybody else starts trying to source a new gas tank. Like, is there one near us? Is there one near the racetrack? Like, what can we do? We patched it up. We kept going. About an hour away, get a freaking flat tire in the same trip. But at this point, I think we were so good at doing this pit stop maneuver that we had that wheel on and his race wheel on maybe 20 minutes, maybe less.
No,
like, it was
less.
incredible.
I'd say it was less than that for sure. I've done like a 5-minute tire change on a festival before.
Yeah. And with the two of us, we were quite a team. So, but we finally made it and ended up getting a replacement gas tank, I think, at the track, which was cool.
Yeah. No, I just remember that whole time, like, even though we had just been on that, like, seemingly crazy odyssey, we were seeing your updates and like, what are they doing? What are they thinking?
And I remember thinking the same thing when you're over here pulling a engine out with your own bare hands. Like,
it wasn't my bare hands. It was Paul and Joe.
That's crazy impressive though. Like, just the commitment these crazy people have to get to these insane meets where you're just racing these silly little cars,
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, the track wasn't the challenge,
Right.
I mean, driving on a track, all day is hard work, especially in these little weird old cars.
For sure.
But getting there was the real challenge.
Getting there was the real challenge. Yeah.
And I see that now, to finish first you must finish, that's kind of what we're going through.
True. Well, and it can be something that you're really committed to because you want to be on track, but also because you want to meet all these cool people. That was the first time we ever got to meet Maurice. He flew in from Australia.
That was incredible.
We met so many cool people there. We met Jim then too. Do you remember?
Yeah, my buddy Jim.
Yeah. How do you know Jim?
Jim, I met on Instagram, just through being
just
into weird
chance.
Small cars, because he's into the first gen Fiat Pandas.
Yeah.
But he's done several huge trips across the U.S. and imported cars.
Yeah.
And he just happened to be crossing the country at that time. He had taken a Fiat Tipo, I think, to the West Coast and sold it, and was driving back to Vermont in a Volvo 740.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, hey, we're out here in Arizona doing this
So
thing.
he just came over because you were like, hey, we're doing some craziness with these little cute hatchbacks on track. You want to come hang out? And he did. We got to meet him then. And Jim has been a cool connection we've had even when we were in Europe, which was really cool.
Right.
Yeah. So Europe's its own story. But that was pretty wild.
I can't wait for that podcast because I don't even know all the details about it.
It was crazy. Yeah. We'll have to interview Will again for that. That'll be fun.
Jim. Yeah, he's great. I've spent time with him in Northern Ireland, spent time with him at a car show in Michigan. We had that time together in Arizona. And the first time we met, he had just delivered a car to the Lane Motor Museum. He's brought over quite a few cars for their collection. And he was on Instagram. His reward was he got to take around their smart for 2 Roadster, the Brabus Smart Roadster from the collection. And he's like, hey, I'm driving this route. And I was like, oh, I'm in Lexington. You can stop by if you want.
Dude, that's so
not having
cool.
met me. He came. He let me drive the Brabus Smart Roadster.
Yeah. People just think it's absolutely bizarre that you can meet someone online and just somehow trust them enough to like come over and hang out for a while. Like we even had somebody just driving through, Jacob, I don't remember his last name, but he was just like, hey, is anybody, along this way? And we're like, yeah, dude, you have a Festiva? Yeah, crash in my spare bed, hang out a while. We'll take you to dinner. Like, it's just fun because you never know who you're going to meet, which is awesome.
I just think there's something about a shared interest. Yeah. And more specifically, these cars and similar cars, that there is just a sort of like mutual understanding, a humbleness.
Yeah.
About the owners. Like we're all, there's, I'm always amazed by the diversity of the people in this community.
100%.
Young, old, all into different interests and fields of work.
Yeah.
But there is a certain kind of humbleness, plays well with others.
Yeah.
Kind of mentality.
Like we're in this together. Like your car is 30 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Like we know to keep that thing on the road, we're gonna need to help each other out.
Yeah. Nobody with a big ego drives a Festiva.
Yeah.
There's a certain like humbleness that comes with it. A certain kind of underdog.
Yeah.
And then there's also the grit of driving a 30-year-old people's car.
Yeah, something that you're just not sure if it's going to start every day. Mm-hmm. And you hope it's going to get you to work every single day, but you just never know. Yeah. But one of the cool things that I love about you is how interested you are in meeting the people, mm-hmm. which I think is awesome. You actually did a big trip just around the United States. And I remember kind of the big part of that was to meet all of these different people that you've only ever interacted with online. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, and I think it was, 20...
This was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, so when I did, it was Madness 10 when I first met you all.
Yeah.
I live in Kentucky. Madness was in North Carolina, so it would have just been a short trip.
Yeah.
Just a day trip or two to get there. But I decided to leave a month beforehand and drive around the entire country.
Oh, was this so that you could win the longest travel award?
That was part of it.
Did it count?
Was part of it. It did count.
That's awesome.
There was some debate. There was some debate about it, but it did count.
That's awesome.
But I wanted to meet as many Festiva people as I could.
Yeah.
And then also at the time, my brother was living in Montana and wanted to go to Madness. And Bob Kitty, who I had become friends with at the previous Madness, was driving from Washington.
Oh, wow.
So I set off.
So you're just collecting these people along your way.
Yeah, that's what we did.
That's so cool.
So I set off and, I went down. And, of course, if I'm going to be out west, I'm going to go out to Arizona and see the folks out there. Saw Brian and Charlie. And went to California and met all those great guys out there.
Wow.
And then drove up the coast to Washington and met up with Bob. And that's when we started the journey together. So me and Bob started convoying together in 2 separate Festivas. Made it to Montana, picked up my brother Alex.
Wow.
And we drove in the 3 Festivas from Montana all the way down to North Carolina. And at the time, you can probably go back and find the old trip wrap-up post somewhere on the Facebook group.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely need to link that because I remember even your setup was so professional. You had a bed sorted out on mm-hmm. one side of your Festiva. You had mm-hmm. all of your clothing stuff on the other side of the Festiva. Maximizing such a little amount of space.
Yeah, I slept in the car as much as possible. Didn't pay for a single hotel.
Yeah.
And not only was I trying to meet as many Festiva people as possible, I was also trying to see as many Festivas as possible.
Oh, sure.
So I stopped in, countless junkyards at the time and took pictures and everything.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. In my wrap-up post from that trip, you can see I totaled up all the numbers of Festivas that I saw.
Wow, that is so cool. Actually, your trip around the country is one reason why I wanted to do my Europe trip the way we did it.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Where we slept in the car and we just try to, we just try to see as much as you can,
And then the next year, I did it again.
Oh, really?
And that year, I made it to every Festiva meet in North America. Except for one, I think, because it was on the same day as another.
Oh, sure.
So I went to
I
went to Lake Stiva. I went to West Stiva.
Yeah.
I went to Madness.
Well, and I think there's an award for that now, even too, at Madness. The most. I don't remember the terminology, but made it to the most meets. Kind of thing. Yeah.
And making it to West Stiva was a big thing because it was in Alberta, Canada.
Wow.
So for that trip, I
You drove your Festiva all the way to Canada?
I did, and then I also went to Arizona and California on the way.
Oh my gosh.
So that trip, I kind of did the same route, except instead of going straight from, because I went up and met up with Bob again in Washington, and me and Bob drove from Washington together up to Calgary, and then up into Alberta, Banff National Park.
I'm sorry,
where the
that
meet
just kind of
was.
blows me away because we've done a lot in a Festiva, but we've not gone to Canada. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of envious now.
So that was about the same kind of trip as, a month long, and I circumnavigated the whole country, including Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Frito, the Festiva I was driving at that time, I think I put 50,000 miles on that car in total in just like 2 or 3 years, and had it in 36 different states and 4 Canadian provinces.
I'm just blown away.
Spent several months of nights sleeping in it too.
Yeah.
Never
So that
paid
was
for a
in
hotel.
Frito.
Yeah, that was all in Frito.
So, but was that your first Festiva?
Frito was my second.
Okay. What was your first Festiva?
My first Festiva was a little red one. It was a red 93. And it was just an L. It was pretty kind of battered. It was just like the right amount of battered.
Sure.
To where it's a fun second car you can do anything with.
Sure.
With it, the perfect beater. And at the time, I was just looking for. I had gotten out of college, kind of got my first real job, had some extra money to kind of have a fun second car, and my brother had a Festiva as his second car as a teenager when I was younger. And I had very fond memories of that car from that.
Okay.
Because
he didn't have it at the time, though?
No,
Okay.
He didn't have one at the time, but I was 6 years younger than him. But I remember that Festiva, and I really enjoyed it. And he was a part of the forum back then.
Oh, okay.
This would have been about early 2000s.
Wow.
And so I remembered the forum too.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine had a Festiva that he was getting rid of, and I was like, yes, I want to buy this. And I had to wait for him because he was a wilderness firefighter. He was out across the country.
Wow.
So I had to wait for him to come back so we could do the title negotiations and get the car and everything. So I had a month to wait. And the way my brain is, I remembered FordFestiva.com.
Oh, sure.
And just for a month, I was reading every article I could. I was listing every mod I was going to do to this car.
Oh my gosh. Planning it all out before you even had your hands on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So I just kind of dove in before I even had the car. I have a resource about this thing that I'm interested in. I'm going to read everything.
Totally.
And I got the car and I just loved it. I've always been into cars, but this was the first car I really worked on.
Yeah.
And of course that was my first Madness a year after I got that car, and that was also a miraculous trip.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What Madness was that?
That was 9.
Because we met you Madness 10. Okay,
was
so
9.
Madness 9. What happened on that trip?
That trip, I was leaving Lexington, and I got in an accident.
Oh my God!
I was about to get on the interstate.
I remember, you hear these stories when you make your own crazy Madness trip there.
This is what kind of indebted me for life to this community. Was
sure.
I was leaving town. I got in an accident. It was just a front end crunch.
Yeah.
Didn't damage anything integral to the car.
How far were you from Lexington?
I was about to get on the interstate to leave Lexington.
So you hadn't even left.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And I hadn't met Paul before or anything,
Yeah.
but he was just, you know how he is when they do Madness. They're making all kinds of posts.
Totally.
If you need anything, call us.
Yeah.
So I hadn't met him. I hadn't talked to him much, but I was like, okay, I need some advice here.
Yeah.
And so I called him. And he said, "Oh, it's just it's just crunched a little bit. It's just nothing is."
Can you still drive?
Yeah, is it still driving? The frame's not bent.
Yeah.
He's like, if you can drive here, if you can make it here, we'll make it better.
Wow.
And I, giving my knowledge of what's happened, I think you can make it. And so I'm like, okay. I mean, most people would have given up right there.
Yeah, you're already
I got
in
an
your
accident,
town. Like you
know.
can easily get home at least, which is good.
And I was like, well, I'm going to be at the place where the people who know the most about these cars are going to be.
Yeah.
And I have the best chance
Smart.
to make it better there. So I might as well do it. And so I set off. Everything was going well. And then I got to West Virginia. It gets all mountainous in West Virginia.
Yeah.
It was raining. Car dies. All the electronics off. I pull over on the side of it was Hurricane, West Virginia. I remember where it was. And the car completely died. And again, I called Paul. He was very generous. He answered. He's like, "Hey, I've lost all electronics. The car won't start. I don't know what's going on." He's like, "Oh, maybe some of your wires got crimped in the smushing.
Oh, good idea. Yeah.
Maybe there's a short. Check your fusible links."
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I get out and I check, and one of my fusible links was like burnt. Like there was still smoke coming off of it.
Wow.
And I get back in the car and we're trying to decide what to do because it won't start without that fusible link.
Yeah. Well,
And-
nowadays we all replace those with the cartridges you could get
And that's what Paul
at
said.
thefestivastore.com.
Yes. He said, if you can get yourself to an AutoZone, get these cartridges.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but I don't know if I can do it. My car is not going to start. And while I was talking to him on the phone, this is a miracle. All of a sudden, I started hearing my warning hazard lights. Tink, tink, tink,
Oh, it
tink.
starts to tink.
The fusible link had like just burnt enough to once it cooled down,
It could connect a little bit.
it came back on.
Wow.
And I was able to start the car. Fortunately, there was an AutoZone at the next exit.
Wow.
I put the fusible links in, make it the rest of the way, no
Wow.
problem. That's not the end of it. Like that was miracle number 1. Miracle number 2 is I meet all these great people.
Yeah.
They're so amazing, so generous and
Totally.
nice to me. And we go to Madness. We have the meet. You know, my car's crunched. Everybody is like, "Oh, we're so glad you're here. You made it." And then the real fun begins, because as soon as the meet's over, we pull it in the garage, and somebody brought me a fender, same color, hood, same color,
Oh.
headlight, same color. But of
Ugh.
course, the core support was all mangled and everything.
Sure.
They pull all the parts off. They cut out from right in front of the shock tower all the way over to the radiator side.
Okay.
You know, the whole basically front
Yeah, the whole
right
frame,
corner of the car.
basically.
They
Yeah.
cut it out. There was a front cut in the backyard that I vividly remember Paul rolling across the yard himself, a front
my
cut of a
gosh.
Festiva. They cut out that
section.
section. And Nate, with all his engineering knowledge, was like making measurements and like using CAD and like bracing
Wow.
it. And they willed in that section.
Yeah.
We have all the pieces back on it.
Yeah.
And like within hours, you know, it was
Yeah.
just like,
That's what we were hoping to do for my cousin's car because he had a front end accident, but unfortunately he had too much actual frame damage.
Mhm.
Like there's a fine line and
That
you
was the
really got to
fortunate
be
thing.
careful. Yeah.
but
Like-
that was like, I mean, thousands of dollars worth of body work. If you can imagine if you were to,
And to have Nate do
yeah,
that
Nate
for
and
you?
Paul and everybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just like,
talented individuals.
it was incredible that I you know, my heart was broken. This is
Yeah.
my little baby that I love so much. You know, I was
You'd spent a year doing all the mods you had been dreaming of and reading
yeah.
about.
I was just
Yeah.
getting into this whole world, and it seemed like it was all going to be taken from me.
Aw.
But then they're like, "Come here, we'll make it better," and they did,
That's
and it was
crazy.
a miracle. And I was just like, "These are the best people in the world."
Yeah,
and
that's so cool.
I don't need to be interested in anything else.
Yeah.
You know, this is it. I found my family. I found my hobby.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Yeah, so I remember just hearing a lot about that in particular because we had that next year when we finally met, we had our own issues getting to Madness because we're driving this lowered crap box and we'll like bust the gas line just on a bad bridge, and then on our way back from that Madness,
grips.
the vice scripts holding on to the rear there. That's its own that's its own tea. That's its own story. But the miraculous part of all of that reminds me so much of my RX-8 adventure going all the way to California, and then what happened there. Like just so many things back to back to back that were just, how did this happen? How did this work out? You know? And I think that's what's so fun about some of these cool car things is if you are driving something you enjoy, driving something you love, it doesn't matter if something breaks. You're going to make it work. Miracles will happen. Like people will come, people will help as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I mean that doesn't happen with every car though. You know, we can't
So
just
true.
say like if you love what you drive, this is how it works.
But
You know, there's fragile BMW owners who are out there. If their tire pressure is too low, they'll have their BMW trailered to an event. You know, like
that's very true.
there's a special grit and humbleness and you know
for sure.
that comes with these cars.
Yeah. Driving something you love that maybe isn't the fanciest thing either, you
Yeah.
know, because sometimes you're absolutely right. We were actually driving in just here in Lexington, and we saw somebody with something on their roof that was just tied directly to the roof, just scratching it up, like didn't even worry about it. And I'm like, we do some crazy stuff with these cars, but
Not
we
that.
at least
Not that.
not that. I mean, and then to think about any friends that I know that are so nervous to drive anything that's even just the tiniest bit risky.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've got a light on. Oh, I can't possibly. I'm like, a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. You
It
know, a little
does.
bit of commitment and excitement for your car also goes a long way. You know,
Yeah.
if you weren't so excited about your Festiva that year, you would have never said, "Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and take my wrecked car and try to drive it to madness." Like,
Yeah.
it's not that close from Lexington to
No,
Raleigh.
it's like 9 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
9 hours, 11 hours. I don't know.
Very cool. Very cool. So, but your Festiva was supposed to be just like your second car, your
Yeah.
fun car.
Yeah, I had a nice, reliable station wagon.
Okay.
Focus station wagon manual. That was like my daily driver.
Yeah.
And I got the Festiva and it kind of ruined everything. Like it was supposed to be my fun second car. And then after a while, I was like, I could just have more Festivas. And I ended up trading the Focus wagon for a Festiva.
Oh, wow.
Because a friend had a Festiva and was having a kid, and his wife was like, "You need to get a more sensible car."
Oh,
was
yes.
like, well,
I remember this wagon.
Yes, and you remember this Festiva.
I remember this Festiva, yes.
Yeah, so it was the most sensible. I traded that wagon, got the Festiva, and I didn't have a reliable, sensible daily driver for a long time.
Yeah.
It was just all Festivas, baby.
Yeah, just trying to make it work with what you had.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So how many Festivas in your lifetime have you had then? Versus how many do you currently have?
Yeah, we'll get into that. I think altogether, I'm up to 11 or 12, and that's including 2 Aspires.
Okay.
And currently, I have 4.
Wow.
Yeah, I just have to think about it quite a bit. But I think
Counting is hard when you're
Yeah.
someone like us. Sometimes people will ask me like, "So how many cars do you have?" And we're like, "We don't count.
Yeah.
We don't count."
So I think it's 11 or 12 altogether.
Wow.
Including 2 Aspires. And
Would you say Frito is still your favorite, or Bean Machine, or
Frito? Yeah, Frito will always be my favorite. Yeah, and I still have Frito,
yeah?
and I still have the car that will become Frito 2 essentially.
Okay.
So yeah, I've got Frito and like a body swap shell candidate.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my long-term storage.
Okay.
When the spirit moves me, that'll be the project. Combined all the best bits into one car.
Wow.
And then I've got a parts car that I traded one car for, and then I have Gonk 2 as well.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So you think the end goal is to create like the Frito 2.0, the perfect, well done Festiva?
Yeah, because I still have a massive parts hoard.
Yeah.
I still have several engines. So, one day it's all going to kind of come together when the spirit moves me.
Yeah.
And I'll have, kind of my ultimate one Festiva that'll be the baby
That's so
car.
cool.
And of course, I also have my Tracers.
Oh, okay.
So I have my 89 Tracer station wagon,
Okay, yeah.
which is just waiting a clutch. I have it in my garage ready to
Shoot,
go
we
at
could do
any
that
moment.
today. What are we doing?
I know, yeah. It's going to be soon.
Yeah,
it just
that's
needs
cool.
a clutch. And then I also have an 88 Tracer hatch parts car,
Okay.
which is the one that I put that B3 in for a little bit.
Oh, seriously?
Yes.
That had to be maybe not the fastest thing.
No. It was great, though. So I bought this 88 Tracer hatch for like $200. It had a sheared crank pulley.
Okay.
So I pulled out that engine because it would have been you'd have to tear down the whole engine to fix that.
Wow.
And I gave that engine to Steven. And then Tommy gave me a B3 head laying around. I was like, we're going to put a B3 in this Tracer.
Might as well.
I mean, you think that might be crazy or dangerous, like, oh, putting a 1.3 in a car that came with a 1.6?
Yeah, well.
But here's the thing. They sold the BF Tracer 323 laser in South Africa until 2002 with a carbureted B3.
No, thank you. I'm sorry, but
So it was standard equipment on this car internationally.
that's crazy.
I want to project again, because Michelle might not know this, but we have a Protege 5 wagon, which is BJ chassis, even newer, and they were also sold to B3.
Yeah.
So most countries
Seriously?
actually, yeah.
You
most
mean my
countries-
protege
Yeah.
with a
Would've-
B3?
To be fair, it's a B3 ME, so it's
Yeah.
16 valve.
Okay.
But that's still, you're talking 70 horsepower max in a full size Protege 5 wagon.
Yeah.
That's how most countries got it.
Yeah.
That just does not compute in my
Yeah.
head. Like, I think one reason why it's cool to have, like, Will's awesome and he is so smart and you're so knowledgeable, but I still am not the most knowledgeable when it comes to all these things. And so that's one thing with this podcast that I'm hopeful is helpful for other people too. Is like, you don't need to be an expert, but the more I get experience with these silly, these silly cars, I can actually kind of understand that, yeah, a B3 in my Protege sounds painful to drive. Like, I would not.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It was fun. It was fun. I could never get I kind of like hyper focused, over obsessed on getting like the ignition timing and everything right. Like I was just trying all kinds of different distributor
just to really maximize your
and
horsepower
valve combinations.
Okay.
Because it was kind of confusing, all the little differences between the BF323 and our Festivas, like wirings and stuff.
Sure.
And I think I just drove it too long with like bad timing and ended up shooting one of the pistons through the block. I was using it as a pizza delivery vehicle at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I noticed that all of a sudden it just was low down on power. The oil light was on.
Oh, no.
I called my manager. I was like, I got to drive this thing home and swap cars. Something's very wrong.
Wow.
And I didn't, I just knew it's running right now. It doesn't sound happy. I need to get it home. I drive it home maybe about 5 miles. I get home in front of my house. I turn it off. And I'm like, okay, is it going to start back up? Because we've all done this before. Like, I made it. I can turn it off. Is it going to start again? And I start again, just boom, boom.
Oh.
And there was a hole in the block. It probably made it home with a hole in the block on 3 cylinders.
What?
Like heroic. So
that's insane.
I thought, you were $200. I put a free engine in you. I got 5,000 miles out of you. You have now graduated to permanent parts car shed.
Wow.
And I thought about scrapping it at one point. I was like, no, this
Yeah.
thing's too neat to not,
I totally
to not
get that.
rid of.
Yeah. Can't possibly let that go.
But you were saying, like, not knowing everything, you
Yeah.
know, and still having much to learn. That's another wonderful thing about this community is it's the best hive mind of information.
Yeah.
Not one person has to know everything because there is one person who is the expert on all the international models.
Yeah.
It
seems like Will's the expert in all of it, and a lot of people think he's the expert in all of it, and he does have basically a catalog of all of this information in his head.
Yeah.
But you can ask anyone in the group, and they will still try to be helpful.
Right.
Which is incredible. You don't get that everywhere.
Yeah, he refuses to learn about the stock. Like I'm saying, it's
if
the
you
best
need a
hive
carburetor,
mind.
you talk to John Glenn. Like, you're not
gonna.
like
John's got a lot of unique
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Will Spencer.
Yeah.
is just a brilliant mechanic. He
Yes.
just has a brilliant mechanical mind.
For
As
sure.
a brilliant diagnostician.
Yeah.
Like you'll mention like you have one small problem, and you turn around and he's like wires deep into your hood.
Yep.
All of a sudden, like it's.
We were doing my swap in the Aqua at Ohio Festiva, and Will Spencer spearheaded so much of that, which was really, really helpful.
He's
a lot of people had their hands on it. Like, I know Zachary was working on it a ton too, but it's just really cool to have so many experts in the room with their own parts and things just getting done.
In their own niche of knowledge.
Yeah.
And, Steven is just a genius in general. Like, that man can figure out how to do anything.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to have him on the podcast and have him and Will talk about the Protege that we were just, talking about.
That's
because
a great story.
That's wild. Like, there's just so many crazy stories that come out of these silly little cars. I know my first story came from figuring out what my dream car was. So
Yeah.
I posed the question to you. What's your dream car?
This is a hard question for me to answer because
Yeah.
there's so many. It's a constant topic on my mind. I'm always thinking of what my next car is going to be.
There's nothing that'll just top them all.
No, it changes every week. It changes every week.
Wow.
Yeah, there's sure, I have my lottery cars, like
Your lottery car. What's your lottery car?
If I won the Mega Millions, it'd be nice to have like a Singer Porsche.
Okay.
Or like an original 356. And a early 60s Beetle, like silly stuff like that. But that's all.
He's already naming 3 of them.
That's all beside.
He can't pick one.
And those are all silly. Like, that's the Mega Million stuff.
Sure.
There's, 9,000 unique Ford or Mazda-based Fords I'd love to own.
Right.
But I think on my mind right now is I'd love to get a first-gen Demio.
Okay.
From Japan or from Europe, because the first gen Demio is great because it is the 3rd generation 121.
What year were those made?
First year was 97 or 98. So it went from, so you've got your Festiva family tree. We start with the Pride 121.
Okay.
Up here.
Okay.
Then we have the divergent evolution of the Kia and the Mazda side.
Okay.
On the Kia side, Ford and Kia developed independently the Aspire, Avella, WB Festiva.
Okay.
And then on the Mazda side, they did the 121 DB Bubble, the sedan, the Bubble sedan.
Okay.
And then one generation down from that is when you get the Demio, which is the tall four-door, they called it the Festiva mini wagon in Japan.
Oh, so
And
cool.
a lot of people know that as the first car you get in Gran Turismo.
Oh, okay.
But still, mechanically, underneath, chassis-wise, engine-wise, it's still pretty, like 90% still first-gen 121 Pride Festiva. Like,
Sure.
the way the suspension set up, still has a B3 in it.
It's got all the heart to it, you know.
And it's still got the high roof, characteristic high roof. It's got the characteristic folding seats. You know, it fold flats into a bed, even more room.
Very cool.
I like those a lot. I think I'd like to have a Demio. I mean, I'd love to have like, this is another obscure one, a Ford Bantam Mazda Rustler Backy. So I mentioned in South Africa earlier that they sold the BF Laser Tracer 323 until 2002.
Okay.
They had a Ute version. They sold a Ute version of the BF 323.
And that's the dream?
Yeah, a little 323 pickup. Yeah, that would be good. I mean, it
I can't wait until Editor Will gets in here and starts putting all these different pictures on the screen so that everybody knows what we're talking about.
You know, it's another dream car that is like probably one of the rarest Mazdas of the 80s. Which one, Will? Do you know?
Of the 80s?
One of the rarest
Rarest?
Mazdas of the 80s.
I don't know.
So rare that I looked it up the other day, and there was a new picture of this car, a new recent picture of this car. And I was excited
How?
because there hadn't been any pictures taken of this car in years.
What? Like, how many did they make?
I don't know. But it's so rare that there hasn't been recent pictures of this car in a decade.
I don't think I can name off my head.
The A2 Day. The Mazda A2 Day. I think that's what it was.
A2 Day.
Which one it
Oh,
was.
ETUD.
Yeah. It was I'm pretty sure that's which one it was. It's the A2 Day, which was a 323, BF 323.
Okay.
Longer wheelbase.
Okay.
Kind of, and completely different body styling. It was kind of like an upmarket luxury 323. But it's so rare that there hasn't been any pictures of it for a few years. And then somebody on Reddit was like, hey, I just picked up this car. I think it's the only one in my
What?
country. Yeah.
That's
And
insane.
I was excited to see actual modern, high-quality pictures of it.
Right.
Is it the A2 Day?
Research Country.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you look that up, Will said the third post on literally Google was that post you're talking about. That's insane. So they didn't make it here. Where all was it sold?
I think it was pretty much only sold in Japan and maybe, close markets, Taiwan, Philippines.
Wow.
Really niche stuff. And then there's all the wonderful lasers in Australia. I'd love to have a Laser TX3, a 323 Cabrio. Of course, I'd love to have a Pride wagon.
Sure.
But
There's no ultimate that tops them all.
there's not.
That's wild.
and-
And that's why you're going to have to be on here so many more times.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, updated. What's my dream car this week?
Yeah. What are you thinking about now?
Like I said, a Demio would be on my mind.
Okay.
Like importing a Demio,
Very cool.
enjoying that because it's another way to get that kind of Mazda Festiva fun, and still have a daily dependable driver.
Yeah.
And I'm getting more as these cars get older, and I guess as I get older too. I'm getting more into the preservationist kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Because all these other cars I've gotten in the past, it's always been, what mods can I do? How can I make
Right.
it look different? What parts
Right.
from other cars can I swap onto it? And now I'm kind of starting to get more in a preservationist mindset. There's not
Interesting.
many of these left. It might be better to keep them.
Yeah.
I've also kind of had a little bit of a hiatus with
Sure.
my
Yeah,
car
like for us, the
enthusiasm.
LX is very stock. Like we haven't
Yeah.
really modified it. Like when we first got it, we did the B6D swap, and that was it. So all the other ones we get to still play with. We get to modify it, make it ourselves. But you're totally right. Just the the perseverance of it, and just to make sure that something is still around.
Yeah, and that's one thing. The dream car question too is I already have one of them. My Tracer wagon
Sure.
was one of my this is a rare unicorn I'll never find.
Right.
That was one of my dream cars, and I have it.
And you have it.
And I would, no sum of money would make me part
Wow.
with my 89 Tracer wagon.
Yeah. Has there ever been a car that you've sold or gotten rid of that you just regret? Or have they all kind of served their purpose?
Yeah,
served
and
you?
the thing that's hard to regret about a lot of the cars I've sold is most of them have gone to friends and people who need them. Because I've actually gotten a lot of people into Festivas, not as car enthusiasts, but just as broke millennials who need a cheap, dependable car.
Totally.
You know,
There's a lot more Festivas in Lexington, and that is you to thank, for
it's
sure.
my fault. Yeah.
It's my fault.
One that I kind of kicked myself was my second Aspire. That thing was nice. It had like, I think just 100,000 miles on it. It was in great condition. The guy I bought it from and just put a new clutch in it. It drove great. The AC was ice cold. It was quiet. It was as nice as an Aspire could be.
Sure.
And I just polished it. It looked great, but I sold it to a friend who really needed it.
Yeah.
They were like in their late 20s, first car they'd ever owned.
Aw.
And I sold it. It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I hadn't heard from them in a while, and I was like, I hope that thing's still out there.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I saw a picture of it in the background on Instagram.
Okay,
I was like,
good.
so good to see the little Aspire. And
that's
they're like,
good.
oh no, I still love it. I drive it all the time. It's the best car. And I'm like, that made me feel good. But I wish I kind of had kept that one because it was so
Sure.
nice. And that was right before I went into doing pizza delivery for a while, and that car would have been perfect for it.
That would have been real nice. You would have been just living the dream every day, driving around.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
But no, I'm glad that I'm in a place where I've kind of got to keep the cars that I like. Like I know what I would have kicked myself if I had gotten rid of Frito.
Yeah, for
in
sure.
in these in between years, and if I got rid of the wagon I have now, I know I'd kick myself about that. But yeah, I think that's like the one I regret, but I don't regret it because it's gone to somebody who uses it.
Totally,
and-
100%.
And everything.
Yeah. Well, listen, George, I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to revisit this dream car thing in at least, a little while. See how it's changed. See what cars you get in the future. I know right now you've been daily in your Ford Maverick,
Yes.
which has been nice. You kind of got us into the Ford Mavericks as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
We'll end with a really cool, cute picture of Maverick, our puppy dog, in both of the Mavericks. Because that's how it all began, or at least how our Maverick journey began. But yeah, I really appreciate you being on.
It's been great to be on here.
It's been awesome. And I want to end with just thinking about, you drove and you currently drive the cars you love, and the cars you love, I'm so glad you never had to say goodbye to. Because I think one thing about this podcast is to think about what you drive, not just as a utility, but something you can enjoy. So thanks for listening. I hope everybody on here has learned a little bit of something, has enjoyed the stories and conversation. Throw in the chat anything you want to hear more about, any questions for George to chime in on. George, you actually do a bit of streaming as well.
Yeah.
If you want to plug that real quick.
Oh, yeah. I stream on Twitch. I'm a charity streamer. All the proceeds from my stream go to charity. But you can find me at twitch.tv/car_hole.
Very cool.
And I mostly play My Summer Car.
Which I love watching. My goodness. It's basically our lives, but at least you're not doing the physical labor yourself.
Right.
You just get to enjoy it.
It's the best car ownership simulator out there. And yeah, all the tumultuous stuff of owning a weird old car happens in this game, and it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, again, thank you so much for being on. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we will, I guess, see you next time. See ya.